Hey everybody, how you guys doing? I'm doing alright. This is going to be a flat earth video and proving that gravity does not exist. What we know as gravity is different forces, and gravity was a word promoted by the popular groups in the scientific community to explain other forces. I will go into this in a minute. Basically, it's a mass and volume situation involving various things like that. I'll go into that in a minute. So anyways, what I want to get into in the first part of this is explaining why gravity doesn't exist, and then we'll go into the how it doesn't exist and bring it back to the why factor in a minute. If a submarine moves in the water, folks, it's pushing inertial forces against convectional forces in the water, or convectional forces in the water. If an airplane flies in the air, folks, it's using inertial forces to push on the air convectually. How is it that a spaceship moves? Does it really shoot thousands of particles per millisecond at every individual particle? Well, that's to be seen, to be heard, etc. But basically, most people will say that the spaceship does not move. That basically it is being pulled or pushed into a direction. But what is it pushing on? You must have an object, a convectional force, that it pushes on. The inertial force is it pushing. What is it pushing on? It is pushing on the minor air around it. I highly doubt it, but we'll leave that one for another day, because I don't want to upset the scientific community that much by this demonstration. I've tried to put this up 2 days in a row, and some of the videos I have tried to put up along with pictures have actually been taken down. This flat earth thing is starting to go around. There was a rapper that called out about flat earth. Neil Patrick Tyson, I believe his name is, has done a boatload of PR for the globalists and the globetrotters. You know what I mean by globetrotters, not the Harlem Globetrotters, but for the people trying to push the dome, because this is starting to catch on that everything they are telling us is a lie. And it is starting to catch on. I don't know whether or not the flat earth is still flat. I cannot actually say that myself. You might believe it, but I cannot actually say that that is true. However, a lot of this is coming out as more and more of what we're being told has been and always will be an absolute lie by the establishment. That is the main reason I keep doing these. So without further ado, let me get on to showing you that gravity as we know it does not exist. Alright, so I have several things lined up here. A couple of photos, some videos. I can't get into all the videos, but I do have them where you can get a good feel for it. So without further ado, I'm going to go through this very calmly, very carefully, and I will explain everything that you are actually seeing and why you have been lied to, because the popularist theory has been held on for so long that everybody gets nervous and you try to change it, yet when Newton and Aquinas and everybody else started talking about the flat earth and gravity and everybody was angry at that time that they wanted to change the model known for thousands of years before the ancient civilizations, and they got nervous back then. So they're nervous back then, they're nervous now, lots of things. But let me just get through this and I will show you that the model that you've been using called gravity does not exist. I have several good sources for this. One is I believe he's a PhD in physics. He talks about magnetism and the fact that gravity does not exist. He'll go rant on for about 4 minutes on that. And there's 2 or 3 other videos which talk about objects falling from the sky and how it's inertial forces versus convectional forces and everything else related to that, and that it is not actually just some strange thing that happens which is a push or a pull, that it is actually related to a mass volume differential, and that you can actually talk about this with regular chemistry rather than chemistry being density chemistry and magnetism. I'll go into the magnetism, but I haven't really watched the video enough to speak to you about that by memory, and I haven't prepared anything, so I'm going to go into that in a minute. So without further ado, I'd like to get into this because this is actually very good PR-wise, and it's very good for everyone else to hear this. It's important for rockets or any type of jet propulsion engines to work in the alleged non-atmosphere or vacuum of space, because without air atmosphere to push against, there's nothing to propel the vehicle forwards. Instead, the rockets and shuttles should be sent spinning around their own axis uncontrollably. I don't think that. I think there's a lot more pressure and various other things that these things do eventually push on, but let's just go with initial theory that they can stabilize from inertial forces of launch a lot better than what we give them credit for. That's what I'm going to talk about. And that basically says that their field of gravity here doesn't really work, or their model of gravity doesn't work here because there's nothing to push off of. You'd be spinning in every direction, and there's no side side thrusters on the wings of the aircraft. We know that the space shuttle, as it was designed as a glider, not as an actual airplane, and it does not have any well, it has some yaw capabilities, but not a lot, where you would have a lot of thrusters on the wings propelling it left and right from yawing. So let me get into this so that we can talk about what this is. This is actually a very important video. I need you to share this with people. I need you to talk about people and talk about this. This is just an intro idea. This basically goes back to the flat earth idea, that basically you see a ship going off in the distance.
So this cargo ship that I'm following here is in real time, and we're at the Tampa Bay.
And what this is going to show you is that a ship does not disappear over the horizon. The only thing it actually does is it disappears from linear view, and that can be shown, and I'll show you how that's done later with the optics.
And we're at the rest area park on this.
Alright, I'm going to get ahead of this.
Let me get her.
So
okay.
she's going to basically zoom in, and it's going to basically go over the horizon. Or, not over the horizon,
like horizon line.
There's a horizon line.
What looks like is curvature to our eye, because that's what we've been taught to believe.
But it doesn't. It just disappears into a dot.
That boat goes and disappears, and we can't see it anymore. Then it dropped over the curvature of the Earth.
That's not true.
How far would you guys say that boat is out there?
About 5 miles or
Mile,
more.
3/4 of the red one. The red boat right there, the red ship. How far would you say that is out there?
Couple miles.
Couple miles? Okay.
And
Right
basically,
so the boat's sinking of conversion. There's that buoy. You can see that buoy sitting on top of the water.
And it basically disappears in the background.
In the foreground. See that boat?
Okay. So there you go. We have that. Now, what's really funny is we have all these satellites and everything in orbit, right? Why is it that in the 21st, 22nd century, whatever you want to call this, depending on your view of history, whether you be of one religion, one culture, one way or one another, Ladies and gentlemen, if there are actual satellites, which I still technically believe that space exists, I'll be honest with that. I do. I believe that planets exist, etc. I don't completely believe this is completely all real, but I believe enough of it is real to where we can start talking about it, and that way from the sciences we can disprove it. But if everything is real, why are weather satellites showing airplanes flying about with satellites on board? Now, this isn't during a hurricane or a tsunami or a tornado, folks, where these guys got to get up close and personal with military aircraft that have the technology. I understand with that, that's fine, but this isn't just surveillance. This is weather planes and stuff like that, things that are supposed to be, you know, shot down, not shot down, beamed down from satellites and stuff, folks. And here we have like NOAA and various others that still use airplanes with satellite rigs that beam back information to the control towers and various other sources they're linked into. I don't want to go against this and say that all satellites are fake, but these are seen a lot more nowadays, and we're getting to a point where now we can track the airplanes taking off, what they're doing from control tower, and various things. And this basically says weather satellite images. If they have weather satellites, why are images behind the weather reporter CGI? They should be real time from space, right? Why do they need airplanes? Very good question. Alright. This one kind of goes from the gravity a little bit, but I wanted to show you this because I didn't get the chance to show you this during the flat earth part that I wanted to show you. Now, if you've watched any of the really good videos online, there's a guy that put up a... I think they'll mention his name, maybe they won't. No, I don't think so here. There's a guy that launched a weather balloon, and he took an image of the actual Earth, the actual sun, and you'll actually see a sun shadow, is what I'm calling it, even though it's a bright spot, where the sun reflects off the Earth here. And if this is true here, folks, then this sun looks like it's a couple hundred, maybe a couple thousand miles away. It is not 9.4 million miles. I disbelieve that. And this sun basically looks like it's right on top of the Earth. Interesting, huh? Okay. It's not part of the gravity part, but I wanted to talk about it because this is actually important. Look at the sunspot. How is it possible that the sun is millions of miles away and it looks closer to me? Well, we're not here to talk about this, but I wanted to get to that point and show you that a lot of this isn't a lot of this isn't what they've been telling us, and now we can prove it. There's even a guy who put up an RC plane, launched it from space, and he was able to show the same images. Alright, basically what I want to talk to you in layman's terms in physics is gravity is basically volume, which equals mass divided by density. Density equals mass divided by volume. Or as I like to call it, basically your mass divided by your volume. Basically, you drop a golf ball in a glass of water, water spills out. That's pretty much the way gravity works. If you've ever put different liquids for a science experiment in a beaker, glass, what have you, and you saw the different layers of the liquids line up due to the different densities, that is how you get gravity in real terms. Your heavy objects basically sit on the bottom, your lighter objects up in the air and in the air, etc. So basically, we do not float away because our body and the carbon and everything in it is heavier rather than the air that is around us in volume, and thus that is above us pushing down, and we don't feel that much pressure because we are used to it now. Now, I am not saying that we've ever felt super pressure because the air is light around us that we only feel a mild pressure, and that is also why when we try to jump or something, we do it limitedly, and then basically the air around us kind of converges, etc., and pushes down on us. I'm not a great orator. I can't really talk about this well enough, but I'm here to bring you the general information. Okay, so here we have a glass of ice water. Here we have ice on the top, ice on the bottom. Why is ice both able to sink and float in a glass of water? Now, picture the ice at the bottom being the heaviest. That would be you on the surface of the planet. Whether it be Mars, whether it be Earth, it doesn't matter. We're not talking about the numeric densities here. This is not a chemistry class. I will not expect you to know the densities of water, the density of your human body, etc. Just know that the ice cube is you because it is heavier than the water around you. The water would be the air, and the floating frozen water would be basically the clouds. This would be a great thing to show your kids because this is actually taught in schools. If you remember learning about densities, you actually learned something very similar to this, and then they basically took it away and said, no, that does not exist because of gravity. Well, folks, basic physics, basic chemistry solves the gravity field problem. Right here, folks. The water is your air, the floating ice your clouds, the denser ice you and everything you can name that's stuck to the surface. When you thrust against the ground, you produce an upward lift which propels you off into the air. In simulated form here would be the water, and you can move through it. So you guys get the idea here. Not a whole lot there, but let's go to the next one. And in here you see a glass of water with an ice cube floating. We've already discussed this because the ice cube is lighter than the glass of water it's in. It floats because of what? It has more air or it has less? You decide. I'll leave that one up to you guys. Now, what I want to talk to you about is going back to the flat earth theory. Did you know this is the entire observable universe squeezed into one image? Now, I've seen it a little bit different than to show it to you in like an iris or an eye form, but this is a good image. This is so much in depth. It has an outer ring. If the planet does exist, it's probably very similar to this. It has a certain depth, it has a certain coverage, a certain curvature, but not a lot, not like they're claiming. All the forces are contained within it, and everything is good. So, that's basically that. I wanted to show you that because I thought that was a great image. Alright, so we are asked by the Newtonian to believe that the action of gravitation, which we can easily overcome by the slightest exercise of volition, basically moving, in raising a hand or foot, is so overwhelmingly violent when we lose our balance and fall a distance of a few feet, that this force, which is imperceptible, under usual conditions may, under extraordinary circumstances, cause fracture of every limb we possess? Question mark. Common sense must reject this interpretation. Gravitation does not furnish a satisfactory explanation of phenomena here described, whereas the definition of weight already given does for a body seeking in readiness manner its level of stability would produce precisely the result experienced. If the influx which kept us securely attached to our Earth were identical with that which is powerful enough to disturb the distant planet in its orbit, we should be more immediately conscious of its masterful presence and potency, whereas this influence is so impotent in the very spot where it is supposed to be most. A lot of words there. I'll let you go in on the interpretation. Basically, if it's so magnificent, how can we flail our arms and legs in almost infinite ability when basically when the same force supposedly exists that makes us fall violently from a 2-story or 3-story or 4-story building, and when we're regular standing up and everything, we have freedom of motion we shouldn't have if the same force was equal in both spaces? Well, the truth is they don't know. They just made something up and they went with the best guess. The density equals mass over volume example is actually a better example. Even I believe that, because it shows you relative space for error. Folks, I wanted to show you this. I did not want to delete this because this one here, and this will be in the sources, was a good photo. I forget what it was, but this was actually a good YouTube. And they're starting to censor this stuff, so get your resources while you can, because this is actually important. Rappers are starting to come out about this. Neil Patrick Tyson, I think is his name, for the Discovery Channel, is really trying hard to discredit the flat earthers, and he's coming out with even a rap song of some kind, making fun of Bob the rapper or whatever his name was. And this is actually starting to get global, and people are actually starting to get scared because they don't have the answers that supposedly we do, because our answers are simpler, faster, and sooner. So some of the images, some of the videos you're seeing here, folks, are being taken down. Alright, this is another ship one. I'm going to just bypass this because I don't want to go through. This is the last image, I promise, that's been removed, but I wanted to bring you this again to show you that they are starting to censor it. Now, this is a great one, folks. You might want to grab a map or Google these places on a map and look this up, because this is actually important. It's more along the flat earth than it is the gravity part, but I wanted to bring it to you anyways. Alright, this is the Chicago skyline from Michigan City, Indiana, folks. Is that the Chase Tower from Michigan, 60 miles away? Supposedly by Joshua Nowicki. So 39 miles away. Sears Tower, Chase Tower, Aon Center, 1136 feet, 850 feet, 1450 feet, and you can see it from the Chicago skyline, from the Michigan, or from the Indiana, yeah, well, what this says here, folks, from Michigan, 60 miles away, you can see it from Chicago, is basically what I want to say. And this proves that things do not disappear over a skyline due to a horizon curve. That does not exist, folks. It just disappears until the image is so distorted it can't be seen visually anymore from our lenses. That's it. It's all optics. This one goes on and says that space is fake, Earth is flat. I wanted to bring this to you because I want to show you, along with this gravity thing, that there's a lot of this going on and that it's actually starting to cause some problems with people. Now, this is important, folks. This gets into the optics and everything else, and I wanted to bring you this because the divergency is where in the horizon your ships disappear, your planes disappear from your view, and this is called a perspective matrix, where the divergence and the convergence align with each other, giving you basically the way things actually are. And we're being told basically right in the middle is the horizon. Is not. It's just a convergence and divergence point of a perspective matrix. Now, I'm not saying perspective matrix like a computer matrix. I'm just telling you that this is the way that things actually exist. And that when you do your mass and volume fields and everything else, you actually see that the optics work with the divergence and the convergences thereof. So this is actually getting to be very, very important. The science is there, folks. You just have to learn to look, learn to harness it, learn to use it, learn to research it, and learn how to argue it exceptionally. Remember one thing, ladies and gentlemen. Our entire world, even today, is run by crazy people who have cognitive dissonance through the roof. The first guy who, when the plague started, folks, and I'm going to go with the last plague because this story is actually supposed to be pretty good, was an MD, and he said if everybody started washing their hands and bodies, the plague would start to go away because they would be able to clean themselves and sanitize themselves. Do you know what happened to that man? And you can go look this up. You can go Google that plague and doctor got tossed in a psychiatric ward. But he was killed, ladies and gentlemen, because he went against the establishment who basically put out a plague or thereabouts and basically said if everybody started sanitizing themselves, washing their hands, washing their face, that they would no longer catch the plague. Well, at that time, it was a highly religious society, and that's not what God wanted. And that guy had to die because of his beliefs. He got into a fight with a guard in the psychiatric ward, and he was killed. So, look at that guy in Oregon. Falkium, or whatever his name is. I apologize for misdoing the name, but he died for the same situation, folks. Upsetting the establishment, saying what he shouldn't have, this and that. Alright, this has to do with your divergence and convergence lines. Look at the number 1 here, the perspective. This is your perspective. The red is your horizon, or supposed horizon. This one's showing a sunset illusion. Look at the arrows, look at this. Alright, I'm going to go into this. Sunsetting illusion on a flat earth. Here's another illustration on how our eyes see into a single vanishing point perspective and why it gives an illusion of the sun setting when it's actually moving away from the viewer into a single point of convergence. There's a word again. Written by Ashley Webster, image by P-Brain, YouTube channel. Good stuff. Okay, now we're getting into some good stuff. Here's some more. Here's the divergence and convergence lines. There is a supposed horizon, all flat, all from an airplane, by a Webster. Amy Webster, or Ashley Webster, I apologize. Flat Earth perspective, grid lines. Perspective of flat plane with grid lines placed over a picture to see that the horizon indeed is flat. Now, this one gets into it, folks. This one is actually pretty good. I want you to pay attention to this. This is your gravity. Let me show you what the video is called. Here we go. Gravity does not exist, nor magnetic polarity. This guy's good. I'm going to stop it at about 10 minutes.
Inertia, what you incorrectly call attraction, is nothing other than inertia and acceleration. It is no different than gravity. Oh, well, what you're saying, well, only inverse poles can come together. You know, if I try to bring two poles together, obviously they will push apart, which of course is repulsion. It's not repulsion, it's force and motion. Inertia and acceleration, force and motion. So how does one conclude retroductively using simplex Platonic logic the fact that gravity does not exist? We're talking about matter ultimately. We're just talking about coherent matter versus polarized and coherent. All matter is polarized definitionally.
This is in the sources.
It's polarized. Otherwise, this interatomic volume of magnetodielectricity wouldn't even exist. So how is it that gravity does not exist? Think. Please use your brains. Gravity is nothing other than incoherent counterspatial acceleration. Just as a moon towards the Earth, or the comet towards falling towards the Earth, or a meteorite falling towards the Earth, that is incoherent acceleration, counterspatial acceleration, versus this, which is coherent inertia and acceleration.
Coherent was the word I was looking for.
Magnetism and gravity. Gravity does not exist. Like I said, there's only two principles in the universe: inertia and acceleration, force and motion.
That is true.
It is literally that simple. Now over here on the right, we have force and motion. You actually have applied force to either mass 1 and mass 2 on either end as you're pushing them together.
I can show this for educational purposes.
Rarefaction in the center. You have spatial compression. Force and motion are inverse to, necessitatively so, obviously, inertia and acceleration. You can actually see, very, very brilliantly, 90 degrees perpendicular on either side. I didn't draw it over on this slide, but over here I show it to you. You see the little inverse clockwise and counterclockwise hairs of the light, of the lines of light that's being scattered underneath the ferrocell. You know, you can actually see this, if I were actually to hold two magnets underneath the ferrocell and bring them together. You can actually
right, you gotta have ferrocell, folks. Look at one on YouTube, ferrocells. You can see this.
I'm so glad to confirm what I knew was there. You can actually see projected out into space. Counter space has been displaced to the perpendicular. Why is that the case? Because in this case, I'm applying force to either one of these mass 1 and mass 2, in this case, two magnets. I have ether rarefaction in the center here. Obviously, I do not have counter space here. I have two like poles. Remember, force is a counterclockwise or clockwise coherent spatial vector. Force as both magnitude and directionality, therefore vector. We're talking about the creation of space, just compounding space. So, you actually have in the center here also spatial compression. You have blue shift. There's blue shift here in the center. But what you have, you obviously cannot see, is inertia, i.e. ether rarefaction, and what happens is off to the perpendicular, you actually have a perfect mirage of a counterspatial sink in quote-unquote free space. They use that phrase loosely on either side of both these magnets that are being pushed together. Why is that the case? Force applied to both ends. You have increasing compounding force and ether rarefaction in the center. So you have force, force, and force. The ether has to pop its head up somewhere. Just like taking a fat woman and throwing her into a bathtub full of water, and she splashes water all out of the bathtub. Archimedes' principle of water displacement, measuring. It is the exact same thing.
That's what I meant by density equals mass over volume.
In this case, we're talking about inertia, i.e. inertia and acceleration, i.e. the ether, and force and motion. Interplay between the two. So I'm pressing these two together. You can actually see underneath the ferrocell, I've shown you in several videos, this, you'll actually see a projection, a mirage. It's not a mirage, it's a real projection. It's a real projection. It's a porthole in the ether to make things really simple and stupid so a 10-year-old can understand it. On either side of these two magnets.
He's a little bit rude, but he's good.
So, what is a magnet? What is magnetism? Magnet is a spatial object. It's polarized and coherent. polarized force and motion and inertia and acceleration. By being coherent, you can actually see it on any magnet. The centrifugal edge, you have force and motion. The centripetal, you have inertia and acceleration. Returning to the counter space, you have polarized force and motion, inertia and acceleration. Only thing you have here that's different between normal mass with gravity is you have coherent bifurcation of force and motion of either quote-unquote pole, and likewise to inertia. You have the dielectric inertial plane, you have centripetal reciprocation, divergence, convergence. So all I've done in a magnet, any different than gravity, gravity does not exist. Gravity is merely a human contrivance, an extrapolation of incoherent magnetism. That's all it is. Gravity does not exist. Obviously you can say, well, that's certainly not the case. Things fall to Earth. But that is merely incoherent counter.
Okay, so basically you heard him explain that. You can go into this video and you can see it full time. He is a little bit rude, but he gets his point across that what we know as gravity is not quite what it seems. Just as I tried to explain it enough to where you understood it in regular terms, this guy is explaining it in the super science terms and the magnetics and the physics. I told you I was going to get into this. This is me trying to get into it and not trying to show you a bunch of equations. This guy actually goes into why not to go into big equations, because basically it goes into bean counting, and from bean counting you can't tell what is actually going on, and this guy's interested in knowing what the bean is and why the bean is, and not why everything does or does not count up, because he is not a bean counter, and he goes into that. It's actually a very good spiel that he gives. So I'm going to move on to what I have here, which is another video, which is another good example. Okay, density causes objects to fall, not gravity. This is basically my spiel on it.
And if you handle from your hands something much heavier than the air, it will quickly and directly fall straight to the ground. Now this has absolutely nothing to do with gravity. The fact that light things rise up and heavy things fall down is simply a natural property of weight and density. That is very different.
This is layman's term. Layman's
Gravity
sciences.
is a hypothetical magnetic-like force possessed by large masses.
And you just heard him say it's not magnetic.
To help explain the heliocentric theory of the universe. Lady Blunt says, most people in England have either read or heard that Sir Isaac Newton's theory of gravitation was originated by his seeing an apple fall to the earth from a tree in his garden. Persons gifted with ordinary common sense would say that the apple fell down to earth because, bulk for bulk, it was heavier than the surrounding air.
That is the idea,
instead
folks.
Of the apple, a fluffy feather had been detached from the tree, a breeze would probably have sent the feather floating away, and the feather would not reach the earth until the surrounding air became so still that, by virtue of its own density, the feather would fall to the ground.
And there's gravity explained in the way that I was describing it. So as you can see here, folks, once again, I have proven that gravity does not exist in the way that it's been described to you as some spooky, spooky force. And if the Earth was rotating, quote-unquote, this would not be happening. That you cannot have a spinning helicopter standing in place on a rotating spinning ball. Especially with gravitational forces and everything else. He is not yawing due to wind. He is not rotating due to the spin of the Earth. Everything we have been told about the Earth is pretty much a lie, including this. So, what I'm going to basically go back and talk about is we're going to go over things one more time a little bit. Flat Earth and gravity does not exist, or at least gravity does not exist. That is the key here. The flat Earth being the subject, the gravity does not exist being the super subject. If a submarine moves by pushing against water, it's pushing against water via the inertial forces. You heard that guy talk about two forces, inertia and I believe he said convectional inertia. Whatever language he used, you guys got the idea. I'll use layman's terms just so I get it right. The inertial force from the object has to push on something, it has to displace something, and it has to push forward or back or sideways, etc. We can see this in water. We can see this in the air. How does it work in space? Well, the way that they're going to eventually try to explain it, once they know that we no longer believe that there's super engines which push into little bits and tiny particles scattered throughout the world in a vacuum, is they're going to say that the force eventually gives off an inertia which counteracts the force of the gravitation it's leaving, and it's going toward a destination with greater or lesser gravitation. That is what they will eventually come up with. I've already seen it on the books. I've heard of engines being built that are EM ready, electromagnetic, and what they will basically say is that the way this works, the way we can now reach the moon in 4 hours, is it's not because the moon is closer like we haven't been told, because no, that's not true. They took 2 weeks in the 60s to reach the moon, quote unquote. It's because we have new engines that can do it faster. That's what they're going to claim. One of the best quotes I heard about a year back is that Kim Jong-un of North Korea said they have flown to the sun. It took them an average of about 9 hours. They walked on the surface of the sun. They got bored, they got back on the spacecraft, and they came home to Earth. Actually, I think at that point they said that they actually were able to propel off the sun using a gravitational field vector and come home 2 hours earlier. Although I don't believe that North Korea has the space technology to put astronauts into orbit, nor would NATO or anyone actually allow them to. He or his PR manager had some damn good science behind what he said. You saw the video. That sun is not 9.4 million miles away. It is way closer. So, this is on the flat Earth, and gravity does not exist, folks. At least not the way you've been told. The easiest way to understand it is what I told you. With the densities, the air is lighter, so it floats. You are heavier, you are sinking, that is why you are on the ground. A plane pushes off into the air, and it thrusts through the air, through the submarines, through the water. And thus, that is how we get what we have. Space, a little bit different. I'll leave that open for another discussion another day. Thank you very much. This is Flat Earth, and gravity does not exist. Flat Earth being the subject, gravity does not exist being the super subject. As always, folks, you decide. Thank you. Forces in the water. Or convectional forces in the water. If an airplane flies in the air, folks, it's using inertial forces to push on the air convectionally. How is it that a spaceship moves? Does it really shoot thousands of particles per millisecond at every individual particle? Well, that's to be seen, to be heard, etc. But basically, most people will say that the spaceship does not move. That basically it is being pulled or pushed into a direction. But what is it pushing on? You must have an object, a convectional force, that it pushes on. The inertial force is it pushing. What is it pushing on? It is pushing on the minor air around it. I highly doubt it, but we'll leave that one for another day, because I don't want to upset the scientific community that much by this demonstration. I've tried to put this up 2 days in a row, and some of the videos I have tried to put up along with pictures have actually been taken down. This flat earth thing is starting to go around. There was a rapper that called out about flat earth. Neil Patrick Tyson, I believe his name is, has done a boatload of PR for the globalists and the globetrotters. You know what I mean by globetrotters, not the Harlem Globetrotters, but for the people trying to push the dome, because this is starting to catch on that everything they are telling us is a lie. And it is starting to catch on. I don't know whether or not the flat earth is still flat. I cannot actually say that myself. Hey everybody, how you guys doing? I'm doing alright. This is going to be a flat earth video and proving that gravity does not exist. What we know is gravity is different forces, and gravity was a word promoted by the popular groups in the scientific community to explain other forces. I will go into this in a minute. Basically, it's a mass and volume situation involving various things like that. I'll go into that in a minute. So, anyways, what I want to get into in the first part of this is explaining why gravity doesn't exist, and then we'll go into the how it doesn't exist and bring it back to the why factor in a minute. If a submarine moves in the water, folks, it's pushing inertial forces against convectional. Yet when Newton and Aquinas and everybody else started talking about the flat earth and gravity and everybody was angry at that time that they wanted to change the model known for thousands of years before the ancient civilizations, and they got nervous back then. So they're nervous back then, they're nervous now, lots of things. But let me just get through this, and I will show you that the model that you've been using called gravity does not exist. I have several good sources for this. One is I believe he's a PhD in physics. He talks about magnetism and the fact that gravity does not exist. He'll go rant on for about 4 minutes in that. And there's 2 or 3 other videos which talk about objects falling from the sky and how it's inertial forces versus convectional forces and everything else related to that, and that it is not actually just self. You might believe it, but I cannot actually say that that is true. However, a lot of this is coming out as more and more of what we're being told has been and always will be an absolute lie by the establishment. That is the main reason I keep doing these. So without further ado, let me get on to showing you that gravity as we know it does not exist. Alright, so I have several things lined up here. A couple of photos, some videos. I can't get into all the videos, but I do have them where you can get a good feel for it. So without further ado, I'm going to go through this very calmly, very carefully, and I will explain everything that you are actually seeing and why you have been lied to, because the popularist theory has been held on for so long that everybody gets nervous and you try to change it.